What is up, YouTube? And welcome back to Yu-Gi-Oh! House. Guys, today I'm bringing you a Bystial Chaos Thunder Dragon deck profile. First and foremost, shout out to David Erpin and Andres Torres for being a huge inspiration on this deck. I'm going to show you guys my take on the deck and what has given me a lot of success of my locals. Before we get started, do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Let's go ahead and jump in. I'm running 3 copies of the Bystial Lubellion. This card has a summoning condition to special summon itself from hand and or graveyard by tributing a level 6 or higher Dark Dragon monster, and also has the effect to set face up in your spell and trap zone one of your branded continuous spell and traps, like Rebranded and Branded Beast. With the Bystial Lubellion, you have access to all of your Bystial monsters, especially arguably the most powerful Bystial Magnamut. Being able to search for any dragon card in your deck is huge in this strategy, rounding off any sort of follow-up that you need for the next turn, or just adding more Tearlament hate to your hand. I am running 3 copies of Bystial Druisworm, who has the quick effect to special summon itself from the hand by banishing a light or dark monster from grave, as long as your opponent controls a monster, with the added bonus of if it's sent from field to grave, it gets to send a special summoned monster. I've maxed out on all the Bystial names to assure that I have enough interruption against Tearlaments. Not only that, Saronir can be discarded from hand, sent from deck, or even sent from field to get its effect off, which can send things like Rebranded and or the Bystial Lubellion. Rebranded and Branded Beast set up so much for your Chaos engine. Branded Regained can shuffle back a light or dark monster that was banished to draw a card, which allows you to recycle a lot of the cards that you play at 1. Not to mention, it is a form of interruption when your opponent normal or special summons to set up a Bystial from grave. That way Branded Beast can tribute it to pop a card. And it's of course worth mentioning that Branded Beast can put Branded Regained from the graveyard into the face-up spell and trap zone during the end phase. I am playing a single copy of Chaos Dragon Levianeer. Going first, I like to rip apart my opponent's hand, and Chaos Dragon Levianeer can shuffle a random card from your opponent's hand into the deck if you banish 3 dark monsters to special summon it. And then of course, going second, it's an awesome tool to bust your opponent's board. I run a single copy of Chaos Emperor, the Dragon of Armageddon. I know this card is a bit pricey, and if you aren't willing to spend as much on a rogue deck, you can easily swap this out for a second copy of Chaos Dragon Levianeer. But of course, this card comes with a high price tag because of how much extension it allows in this deck. You can recycle Levianeer from your banish zone or even your Bystial monsters. Anything that's a dragon, you can recycle back from the banish zone with this card. And it really helps you swing for game when you're able to special summon this monster out by banishing a light and a dark monster from the graveyard. Darkest Diabolos, Lord of the Lair, has so much synergy with the Bystial engine. It might as well be a Bystial card. Anytime Lubellion tributes to special summon itself, it'll trigger Diabolos. So not only are you special summoning it on your turn, you're most likely able to special summon this card again when you use Branded Beast. So this card allows for so much recursion and follow-up. And like I mentioned earlier, I like to tear apart my opponent's hand, and by tributing a dark monster, Diabolos can put a card from your opponent's hand on either the top or the bottom of the deck. Grand Tusk Dragon can be special summoned off of Hieratic Seal and or a Tomb. Of course, it is a bit more situational in the Tearlament matchup, but I do want to make sure that I have forms of interruption that greatly hinder things like Flowanderies and Sprite. And popping 2 cards on the field honestly does just that. It can tear apart any board in the process of being built. I would play more if I could, but unfortunately, White Dragon Wyverbuster and Black Dragon Collapse Serpent are both limited to 1 copy each. Though that isn't really much of an issue since Chaos Space and Rebranded can both shuffle them back into the deck, making for a mini package that allows for so much extension. And both of these cards are 1.5 card combos to get into Hieratic Seal of the Heavenly Spheres. Wrapping up my baby dragons, I run a single copy of Starliege Seifert and a single copy of Omni Dragon Brotar. Starliege Seifert can search for White Dragon Wyverbuster and Black Dragon Collapse Serpent just by sending itself, or you can send one of the level 8 monsters in your hand or field to be able to search for another combo piece that you haven't gotten into yet. Not to mention, it has an excellent graveyard effect, and it's why I feel comfortable with playing just the single copy of Chaos Dragon Levianeer. Omni Dragon Brotar comes in so clutch when being special summoned off of things like Atum or even Horatic Seal of the Heavenly Spheres. It can target itself to search for a dark dragon monster or a light dragon monster that you might have on the field. Either way, being able to search for Bystials that you have not used this turn by dumping one of the Bystials you might have opened multiple of is just way too free. Not to mention, it has a graveyard effect to special summon itself back from the grave if a monster you control is destroyed by battle or an opponent's card effect. The dedicated normal summon of the deck, Battery Man Solar. With the Thunder package being quite small in this deck, I like to make sure that I max out on my normal summon. That way I'm seeing it more often than I see the Thunder Dragons actually in hand. Not to mention, it does special summon a token on a mandatory effect when a Thunder monster is special summoned. And surprisingly enough, that does come up in the Sprite matchup. But more often than not, you're sending Thunder Dragon Roar. That way you can absolutely explode when you're banishing it to special summon a Bystial from hand. If you guys are a long follower of the channel, you know that Thunder Dragons is my favorite archetype. And the OG Thunder Dragon has always been a staple in Chaos decks. Being able to mill one at a time to set up your graveyard, or just dumping one to go +1 and searching 2, filling up your hand, mitigating the cost of a lot of the spells that you discard with. Much how Tearlaments plays a small Sprite package and is still considered Sprite Tearlaments, this deck, in my opinion, is still considered a Thunder Dragon deck, even though the package is incredibly small. Opening these cards is honestly suboptimal. You don't want to run multiple copies of Thunder Dragon Roar, Thunder Dragon Dark, and Thunder Dragon Hawk because they can all be accessed through Battery Man Solar. Roar, when it's banished, will special Dark, and Dark, when it leaves the field, will grab you Hawk. Seeing these already in hand can make the hand a bit cloggy. However, this package does help you push past Dimension Shifter, Dimension Fissure, and Macrocosmos. And if one day Konami decides to give us back Colossus, then of course, these numbers would be increased. And like I said earlier, Roar will special summon from deck, Dark will search the deck, and Hawk can reborn a monster in the graveyard or in the banish zone, as long as it's a Thunder Dragon. And of course, you can use Hawk's second effect as well to put in the cards that you are going to be searching and or have access through your combos, having a magical mallet-like effect. Chaos Space is a powerhouse of a card in this deck. Being able to search for Chaos Dragon Levianeer, Chaos Emperor the Dragon of Armageddon, or even the Bystial Lubellion by sending a monster of the opposite attribute allows for a lot of consistency with this deck. And Chaos Space's graveyard effect is important as well. Being able to recycle things like Chaos Dragon Levianeer or even your baby dragons to draw a card, mitigating the cost of the discard that you had done earlier. I also like to run 3 copies of the Melody of Awakening Dragon. This helps you see your hand drips in Diabolos and Chaos Dragon Levianeer, making sure that you can consistently rip 2 cards out of your opponent's hand before they even have the chance to play. And rounding off a 40 card deck, I like to run 3 copies of Forbidden Droplet. As you can see, I don't like the danger monsters too much in this build. I think they would be better in a more pure Thunder Dragon build. However, I do still find myself wanting to get rid of some of the cards that I have in hand. And what better way to do it than with Forbidden Droplet? You get the most bang for your buck when you're able to discard cards and lock down your opponent's monster effects. Not to mention, this deck is a OTK machine. If you're able to cut the attack of all the monsters of your opponent controls, you're going to be able to swing for game incredibly easy. Now, getting into that extra deck, I run a single copy of Striker Dragon and a single copy of Guard Dragon Pisty. Striker Dragon is here to link off our babies like White Dragon Wyverbuster and Black Dragon Collapse Serpent to be able to search for the other one you sent to graveyard. And I like to play Pisty because it allows for so much extension, especially when you're able to get it out on the board with Striker Dragon. And a running theme with this deck is recycling back from the banish zone. You're not at all too worried about the cards that you're banishing because you know that in one way or another, you're going to have access to them again. Honestly, this is the MVP of the extra deck. Horatic Seal of the Heavenly Spheres is probably one of the best Dragon Link monsters ever made, with of course the exception of the banned ones. This card special summons when it's tributed, and you'll likely trigger that when you're activating its effect to tribute a dragon to bounce a card from the hand. Of course, I mentioned earlier, you can special summon things like Brotar to get rid of some of the multiple Bystial names you open, to search for a different name for more interruption, or even Grand Tusk Dragon to pop 2 cards on the field, which will make it insanely hard to play for a lot of Sprite builds and Floowandereeze builds. I'm running a single copy of IP Masquerena. It's a nice end board piece, and not to mention, it has such a slept on effect. When you use this card as link material, the monster that was link summoned cannot be destroyed by card effect. I run a copy of Nightmare Cerberus because it is very important to respect Baguska. It's quite literally the easiest out to the card, and this deck gets the added bonus that it fuels your graveyard. Dark the Dark Charmer Gloomy is by far the most generic charmer because dark monsters are the highest played monster in the current Yu-Gi-Oh meta. And of course, snatching something like a Magnemite feels so powerful because almost the entirety of your deck is dragons. Nightmare Unicorn, much like Nightmare Cerberus, are generic utility staples that are important to run in your rogue decks. You want to be mindful of when you're activating this effect. You don't want to proc Perlerino by shuffling back one of the tier limit monsters. But other than that, Nightmare Unicorn is an incredible card because as long as you can target it, you're probably going to be able to get rid of it. And of course, fueling your graveyard in this deck is necessary. I run a lot of monsters that are level 7 or higher, so Blackluster Soldier, Soldier of Chaos felt like a no-brainer. After this monster has gained 1500 attack, there really isn't a lot of meta strategies that can out this card. But be wary, you're wanting to really avoid this in the Sprite matchup because they have access to things like Sprite Smashers and of course Sprite Pixies. And I almost forgot to mention, this card non-target banishes after it destroys a monster by battle, which can really help you rip apart your opponent's board. Apollousa, Bow of the Goddess, is another nice, generic link monster that will just absolutely wreck Floowandereeze. That deck can barely play around 2 disruptions, and you setting up 4 monster negates on an Apollousa, I mean, they might as well sign the slip there. Access Code Talker is one of the best link monsters that is generic enough to splash in just about every deck, though I do reserve it for strategies that aren't the tier limit matchup because destruction really isn't the kind of removal you want against that deck. However, Access Code Talker lets you steal a lot of games at the bottom tables, which in turn climbs you up to the top tables where you're going to be facing a lot of tier limit Ishizu. One of the best link monsters I have in this deck, aside from Hieratic Seal, is Saryuja Skuldred. I know, it feels like running Thunder Dragon back in 2019. Being able to draw 4 cards and put cards in to the deck that you didn't want in your hand in the first place is just insane. That and special summoning a monster from the hand for free like Diabolos or any of your Thunder Dragon monsters just smells like an OTK. Not to mention its mandatory effect where if a monster is special summoned to a zone that Saryuja Skuldred points to, it'll gain 300 attack. But going first, I'm usually linking this monster off for Hieratic Seal or even making some of the more spicy options in the extra deck. Now getting into our Xyz monsters, I have access to level 4s, so it feels almost a no-brainer to throw in Abyss Dweller. But of course, Ishizu Tier Limits is not the only deck affected by Abyss Dweller. Lingering effects are incredibly powerful in Yu-Gi-Oh! Even if you do get rid of the monster, on the field, its effect already applied and they are locked out of their graveyard. Hieratic Dragon King of Autumn is here when you really want to pop off because this deck can combo its butt off. And of course, take that with a grain of salt. I don't mean to blindly play into your opponent's hand and potentially get Nibiru'd. It is a part of playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Make sure you're counting your summons. Rounding off my Xyz package, I'm running number 38 Hope Harbinger Dragon Titanic Galaxy. Man, that name is long. It has a quick effect to negate a spell and has the little known effect to redirect attacks to it, though against skilled players, that effect rarely comes up. And an even more niche effect, if another Xyz monster you control is destroyed, you can target your own Titanic Galaxy to make it gain its attack, which could even help you out towers monsters, otherwise known as monsters that are unaffected by card effects but can still be destroyed by battle. Rounding off our extra deck, TRISHULA, the Dragon of Icy Imprisonment. The larger the tournament, the more this card puts in work. Once I'm at the top tables, I'm 4 or 5 rounds deep, I know exactly what I'm going up against. This card can be considered an FTK. Banishing a Thunder Dragon from my deck to extend, banishing a card from my opponent's deck, and then having my choice of banishing a card from their extra deck, all while gaining knowledge on what they're playing, is one of the most insane cards this deck has access to. I don't know how many Ishizu Tournament players have just completely scooped after I banished their only Kikalos, rushing to their side deck, knowing they're gonna have to deal with this monster in game 2 or even game 3. Though I will admit, at smaller tournaments, like 3 or 4 round tournaments, the card is a bit more niche and it is actually quite rare that I summon it. This is one of the most fun anti-meta strategies available and will help you wipe the floor with Ishizu Tournaments. Hand looping and banishing from your opponent's extra deck? I mean, what more can you really want? Alright guys, thank you so much for checking back in with Yu-Gi-Oh! House, and peace!